Please give me your feedback that everything is clear and you can see our speaker, Lukasz. Can you see? Okay, I see that now everything is okay. Okay, I would like to introduce Lukasz. Lukasz is driver for Agile Community Poland. Thank you, Lukasz, that you're with us. So, Lukasz, you have 50 minutes to your presentation and 10 minutes to QA session. Anwar will assist you, and he will be your moderator today. And I will assist to Anwar and you.
Thank you very much.
Let's start.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to have this opportunity to share with our participants basically the presentation that I have prepared. So today I would like to tell you a bit about metrics and how you can use some very simple metrics with your teams. I mentioned Scrum Teams in the title, but to be honest, if you're working, for example, in Kanban or in a bunch of other approaches, most of these metrics will be possible to use right away, and the others with very little modifications. So even if you're not working with Scrum, I believe that this presentation can be quite useful for you. And I can promise that we'll talk a little bit about productivity, about being predictable, about delivering high quality, about being responsive as a team, and about delivering value. So with that introduction, let me just share 2-3 sentences about who I am and why do I think I might have something useful for you. I'm currently a Scrum Master. I'm taking care of that role for almost 5 years now. And I'm with EPAM for over 5 years at the moment. And I'm working in the IT industry for over 11 years. Most of that time I have spent while using Scrum or supporting this actively with several different teams. So why do we even want to consider metrics? Why would we measure anything in the first place? I would like to encourage you to always start that by asking questions about specific problems you're trying to solve. Because if you'll just measure and introduce numbers for the sake of having numbers, it will not be very helpful. So I'm always focusing on specific issues. Imagine the situation you're in planning with your team at the beginning of the sprint. So one of the questions you might want to answer is, how confident are we with the plan for the upcoming 2 weeks? We have the scope defined, sure, we think it might work, but are we really confident that it will work out? Most often we have no idea. We just have our gut feeling, and that's not that much. Another problem that we might have is related to our responsiveness. Imagine that you have just delivered a new product and your users are already using it, and you're learning that actually there is a ugly hack that users can use that some of them are already abusing, and we are losing money right now. More of users are learning about it, and that's very dangerous for us. We have to fix it as soon as possible. How fast can we do that? So yeah, that's one of the questions that we'll often get. And even with less of the pressure, just the regular question, by when can I have this feature from your product owners? Also a question that we're trying to answer quite often, and we might be able to do that with some simple metrics. Another problem that we might have is we have just introduced some changes to our team. Imagine that a new team member joined your team, or maybe hypothetically, for some reason, your entire team recently had to start working from homes instead of from the office. And for example, your management is wondering, are we still as productive as we used to be before moving to work from home? And with this data, you might be able to answer this question and to see if you manage to keep the same productivity level. So potentially quite useful information. Besides that, imagine that sure, we are productive. We are more productive than ever. We are working so fast we cannot really keep up with our own pace. And at the same time, the quality is getting horrible. It's not necessarily the scenario that we would like to be in. So yeah, one of the questions that we might want to keep track of is, are we sacrificing quality? So that's another area that it's worth to keep in mind. And last but not least is value. Imagine that you're working really fast, you're very responsive, you have high quality of things that no one needs. If you're delivering the features that were not even top priority, even from the point of view of our company, we just delivered the stories that turned out to be quite easy, and others like that, we might work very well and still not deliver value. So it's worth to keep track of delivering not just story points, but actual value as well. So these are 5 areas that I will focus on: predictability, responsiveness, productivity, quality, and value. And I'll encourage you to always remember about those 5 areas. You might use slightly different tools to track them, but it's very dangerous to neglect even one of them. Keep in mind that your focus will change. Sometimes you'll really put attention to the fact of being productive. You'll want to make sure that you will fulfill some kind of legal requirements that you have to do by, let's say, September. And if you won't do it, you'll lose license to proceed with your business. So you cannot really afford to fail to meet this deadline. Then you'll definitely focus on productivity. However, there are other situations where people don't really care if in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks you'll deliver the amount of story points that you predicted. They're actually really eager to see that the problem that is on production right now is fixed within days, not within sprints, maybe within hours. But sometimes we really need to react fast, and it's worth to keep in mind that our responsiveness is on specific level. So you will probably focus on one area at the time. You will probably focus on introducing some improvements in one area at the time. But even then, try to keep track of all the other areas. I'll share some simple metrics. I will share with exactly one metric for each of those areas. And like I mentioned, you might want to introduce, for example, second, third, or 5 metrics for each of those areas. It might be helpful. You might introduce completely different metrics for each of those areas. Still, I really recommend to have at least one, to start with something simple and only replace this after you'll feel that, okay, that approach does not fill one specific need, we'll extend it somehow. And with that, I will also share some disclaimers for those metrics that I have prepared. First of all, focus on trends instead of absolute values. Imagine that your team delivers 100 story points per sprint. Is it good? Is it bad? That really depends on the context. You might want to see if, for example, our responsiveness is getting better or it's actually slowing down. It's impossible to say that, for example, being able to answer within 2 days, is it enough? But the fact that our responsiveness has improved by 50%, that's quite clear. So we can focus on actual trends of these metrics. Another disclaimer that I would like to share. This approach will absolutely not work for comparing different teams. It might really badly backfire, since if you'll try to tell one team that they're much worse than the others because you've got some numbers that prove that, you might actually, first of all, be really wrong about the result itself. And it will definitely push them towards defense and potentially to try to mess with those numbers. So it won't help anyone. Please avoid it at all costs. And at the same time, this tool is fantastic for every individual team to help them improve over time, to compare our results with our own results from 2 weeks ago, from 4 weeks ago, from a quarter ago. So keep track of your own results over time. So in one moment, I'll go through those simple metrics for each of those areas: predictability, responsiveness, productivity, quality, and value. And I can hear a voice. Do we have a question?
No, that we have some question in the chat, but
okay. What's the question?
What the question? Just a second. Let me just open the question. You moved from Java developer to Scrum Master. What are the chances to perform from non-IT sphere, be Scrum Agile Master in IT teams?
Okay, good question. And if it's okay for you, I'll get back to it at the end of the presentation, since it's slightly out of the context for this area.
Yeah, let's do it.
And please remind me about it at the end of the presentation. It's a good question, and it's an interesting discussion. So, and also, if there will be any other questions also related to directly what I'm speaking at the moment, then I'll be more than happy to stop for a second and provide more details in that specific area.
Let's do it that way.
So that's also okay. And you, I think, chose the best possible moment to mention questions from the audience, since, first of all, you can right away download this presentation along with a simple tool that I have prepared, a simple Excel file that will go along with my presentation. So you can visit right now ipa.ms/metrics and download both files easily. So it will help you to ask questions along the way, especially if you'll imagine that you want to start using those metrics next week with your team. So when you're watching the slides themselves, it might seem simple, and later on you'll simply have questions. If you will, just write an email, contact me. I'll be more than happy to guide you through it, to answer any doubts, and to help you out. But yeah, feel free that you'll receive both files, and that at any point of time during the presentation, in a week, in a month, I'll be happy to provide you any support related to usage of these metrics. So with that, first area, predictability. So trying to solve the problems like how confident are we with a plan? In order to keep track of that, I recommend to compare how much we have planned for a specific sprint, how many story points have we committed, and how many of them have we actually completed within that sprint. So if we have planned for, I don't know, 10 story points and delivered 15, we're not very predictable. Sure, we are productive, that's nice, but it kind of wasn't the question. We want to be able to guess as correctly as possible the exact amount of story points we can deliver. So if it's overcommitment or undercommitment, let's say we have also delivered just 10 story points, even though we planned 15. Both of those scenarios are not perfect. The key is we want to be able to estimate how much we can realistically do. And keep in mind, on the bottom of this slide, I have shared an example of how the perfect predictability would look like. It doesn't mean that every sprint we deliver exactly the same amount of story points, because sometimes people will take vacation, will note about it. We will be able to plan for it. So we'll just predict that the next sprint will deliver slightly less than in the previous one, and that's fine. The key is try to know your possibilities and aim at that. The next slide might look slightly scary, even though it's really not. I know that it might be small for some mobile devices and so on. Don't worry about it. like I mentioned, you can download the file to take a look on the details. It's not really necessary to analyze this in depth. It will be the same for other metrics, but it's just for people who are really curious on how is everything exactly calculated in the second file that I'm providing. And let me also show you the file and just let me know if you can see the super scary, although in reality, simple Excel file at the moment. Can you see it? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, very big
Yes.
file.
Okay, it seems bigger than it is. Realistically,
Yeah.
you will just put how many story points you planned and how many you completed. Out of this, you'll immediately get a bunch of diagrams that will adapt and will do basically most of the work for you. So once again, really recommend to simply download it, play around with it, and put inside that file your actual data that works with your team. So yeah, most of this is calculated on your behalf, and you'll also see the results on both short-term and long-term based on a single sprint or based on 3 sprints. So it's not so dependent on single specific incident that might disrupt your data and introduce some unnecessary noise. So there's a lot of calculations that are here just to explain to the user what's going on exactly, but realistically, all you do put, we committed 10 story points, we completed 15, and that's it. Similar level of complexity for other areas.
Lukasz, there is one question in the chat, and maybe
Yes,
you
what's
can
the
answer it
question?
right now. Can you share your experience of explaining what is story point for top management or business departments? Sometimes it's very tough.
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Basically, at the beginning, it's absolutely useless measurement at first, until you work with it for a while, until you actually set up kind of a user story ruler that explains what a 1 story point is for the team, what 2 story points is for the team, what 3 story points is for the team. And then once you're able to present that in even like a visualized form, that it's similar to comparisons like t-shirt sizes, S, M, L. With that part, they should probably be familiar by now. And then you can also explain that you can call them story points, you can call them carrots, you can call them apples or oranges. It doesn't matter. The thing is, the meaning of the story point itself is being crafted by each team individually, as it will differ from team to team. Even within a single team, it will change over time. So to upper management, I would explain that it's a tool used by development team and their product owner to align on the effort needed to deliver specific functionality that helps them to predict their possibilities within a unit of time, within a sprint. And that helps at the same time product owner to balance the effort and the value from each of the ideas, each of the product backlog items that he needs to choose from when setting priorities.
I guess we can move forward, and if there are some other questions, we will get them in the chat.
Thank you very much. With that, as I mentioned before, even though the description might look scary, it all comes down to this tiny little arrow, the difference between those two bars. And once again, I'm here stating the disclaimer that both overcommitment and undercommitment are bad, because that basically means that we cannot really predict how much we can do within 2 weeks, or if your sprint is shorter or longer in different unit of time, but we cannot really predict in short term. So how can our product owner, how can a company make plans for the long term if we're not caring about the predictability even on a single team, a single sprint level? So the next area after predictability is responsiveness. So here, once again, we got something that seems scary, but is really, really simple at the same time. For responsiveness, I really recommend to use cycle time. So basically, from the moment that one of your team members will pick up a task to the moment that a product owner will be able to say, yes, we've got it, it's done, according to your definition of done, it's delivered. How long did this period of time take? I do not mean when it was placed in the backlog and waited for several weeks until we picked it up, from the moment that it became a top priority to the moment that we're ready with it. How long does this period of time take? And you can check that for each of the sprints. You might have a problem, which task should you choose, since let's say we delivered, I know, 7, 8, 20 stories within a sprint. Each of them had different cycle time. Some of them took a day. Some of them actually were dragging along for 5 sprints. And we just hated that task, but it's finally done. So which one do you choose? For that, I recommend to choose median. So basically, if you would sort all the tickets from this sprint and check cycle time of each of them individually, the one in the middle of this sorted list is the one you're looking for. Luckily, you don't have to do it manually. It would be a lot of effort, and I'm not sure it would be worth it, but you do get that information out of Jira, out of the box. Basically, all you have to do is get to your own team board, get to the tab reports, and choose the control chart. In that chart, you got extremely useful data. You got a lot of data. You can actually get many different measurements that you would be interested in, but median is one of them right away. You can just grab it and just keep in mind that you need to set the boundaries of the time that you're interested in. So I would recommend to choose the beginning and end of your sprint, so you know how your sprint worked out. And with that, you'll basically know that, yeah, this sprint, most probably, if you would ask for a task, how long before I'll get it, it would be 2 days and 1 hour. Is it a lot, or is it a poor responsiveness? That depends on the need of particular team and on the context. So for that, also within the same tool, you actually have a single small field. What responsiveness would you like to achieve? And then that is calculated as 100%, and you're comparing your results to this target that you set up for your own team by yourself with the context that you've got, because you know your team's the best, so you're the one who should be able to answer this question. Also, just a quick note, you can extract all of this data within like 5 minutes for the past as well. It does not mean that you have to wait for 5-6 sprints to get this diagram. You can have them in 1 hour working with your team, so you can check how did you do in the last quarter, for example. So with that, I'd like to move to the next area, which is productivity. And once again, I will start with disclaimers, because we might want to be getting more predictable constantly. We might want to be more responsive constantly. But if we'll try to get more productive indefinitely, it will become unsustainable. It's basically impossible to avoid it. If we'll keep raising the bar, at some point of time, we'll reach the point where team cannot really keep up with that, and it is forced to start cutting corners. And no one wants that. That's why it's even explicitly mentioned in principles behind Agile Manifesto. We should maintain we should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. So what I really recommend to do in this area is basically choose a period of time where you're quite happy with the productivity you had, and use that as your target. You don't want to get slower than that. Keep it. Keep that level of productivity you're happy with, but under no circumstances use it to keep increasing pressure until we cannot handle it anymore. So with that, once again, the story points are coming to the rescue. We know that we have introduced some changes to our team, and we can see how many story points we managed to deliver in the past, how many story points we are able to deliver right now. Although it might be a slight oversimplification, because when we first introduced this approach, it was at the beginning of this year, and our first conclusion was, yes, we are more productive than we were when everyone got for vacation around Christmas. Not the most useful information in the history of the world, so we thought, are we able to actually kind of recalculate it? Are we able to compare this with the capacity we have? And luckily, we are checking our capacity during every planning to see already for the predictability if we want to go for some vacations and how many of our developers are available and for how many days. So with that, we can easily calculate our capacity and basically include it in the equation. So with that information, we can simply also divide the delivered amount of story points by the capacity we had in specific sprint. So once again, also with this file, you will have a place where you can put your capacity for a specific team, and then it will be also be included in the equation. And I can see that we've got another question.
It will be better to save it for the last 10 minutes because it's far away from this context. And yeah.
Okay, so please remind me about it afterwards, and this way we'll not miss it. So getting back to the slides. Yep, it's also quite simple to calculate productivity. Also, if you do not have data about your capacity, I recommend to use by average 85% because I was tracking that data for quite a while, and I noticed that in the usual sprint, in most cases, the average amount of unavailable developers, unavailable capacity is 15%. So that's slightly more precise than putting 100% everywhere. But if you want to keep that aspect out, just put 100 also. That works. It's not as good, but it's also a good starting point. So once again, the slide might look scary, but it simply explains what the Excel file does underneath. And it's also not a rocket science, it's a division. So with that, I would like to move to most interesting part, which is about quality. And this is part that will be relying the most on the honesty of the team. Why is that? We might try to count how many bugs we have at the moment, but some of them we have caused. Some of them were caused by other teams. Some of them were in our backlogs for a very long time before anyone noticed. So this will differ. With that in mind, I have moved to a different approach. So I started to check with my teams for what production issues, if any, do we feel responsible for? And you might have teams that will say that, no, we never messed up anything. Absolutely, we're great. We never had a single issue with quality. And maybe they are, or maybe some teams will pretend that they are like that. But the only consequence of that will be they're missing the data to learn from it. So I'm making sure that my teams are safe and that they can learn based on that data, that they can be brutally honest with themselves and see that, okay, yeah, we're improving our productivity recently and it backfired. We started working too fast and we neglected some specific cases and we messed up. We should learn from it and we should avoid it in the future. So they're actually painfully honest and they're able to point out which specific issues were our fault. With that, we also had one challenge. At first approach, at first draft, we just checked how many issues we introduced, but one issue is not equal to the other. Some of them were really tiny, cosmetic, and no one really cared about such small mistakes. Other were critical and were really needed to be fixed as soon as possible. And we wanted to start to differentiate between the two. At first, we thought about, okay, was the hotfix needed to solve that situation? And we calculated as a proper entire 1 minus point for serious issues and minus half of a point for the issues that were not that critical and did not require hotfix. But even then we learned that in some cases, hotfix was on the way anyway, so something small was assigned to that hotfix. In other cases, even though the situation was serious, for a bunch of different reasons, the hotfix was not introduced, it was delayed, and we were getting the wrong data. So with that, we moved to a slightly different approach. We started to basically use the priority of the issue as kind of a score for the problem. For example, P1 is a minus full point, P2 is minus half of a point, and P3 is 1/3 of a point. You can add the wave that is working the most for you, but try to differentiate that and try to basically admit that not all issues are equal. So once again, it looks like some scary rocket science. It's at the same time just adding and multiplying. So once again, the metric is quite simple, and also in the Excel file, all you do is you put how many P1, P2, P3 issues you had, and then you will see on the quality chart how you're doing over time. And what is fascinating in this area is that if you look on those diagrams together, you will see how they affected each other. For example, if you have messed up with your quality at the moment, perhaps next sprint you had a problem to deliver a sprint goal because you needed to fix those issues. So in most cases, if you read all 5 of the diagrams at the same time, you'll get the full story of what is going on at the moment with that team. So for that, we're getting to the 5th area, value, and the question, are we working on the right things? Do we deliver value? And it's not an easy question, isn't it? And for a hard question, it's hard to introduce simple metrics. So what did we do? We have focused on the sprint goals, which is basically, or at least should be, the top priority of what we want to achieve within the sprint. And if we are able to set a goal, development team along with product owner can agree on something that is important, ambitious, and achievable within the sprint. We consider that as something that has value. And if we manage to deliver that, then we are managing to deliver value. If we do not manage to deliver such sprint goal, then it's awesome that we delivered double the amount of story points that we have planned for, but we delivered the wrong thing. So yeah, we're productive, but the value is just not there. So it also helps the team to basically get better at discussing the sprint goal with product owner. It also helps product owner to put more attention to it from their side as well. So for calculating how much value we deliver, this is actually the simplest metric. You either did or did not deliver the sprint goal. I had some questions in this area about, for example, the stretch goal. Should we include it or shouldn't we? Personally, I try to keep it out of equation, but if you'd like to include it, go ahead. It's in the end your team. You have the context. You know if it was priority enough.
Lukasz, there is one question. What does your 0 value period means on the diagram of value? Is it something like refactoring or what?
So this is the example of sprint where we failed to deliver the sprint goal. So it jumped directly into a 0 because we are assigning either 1, yes, the sprint goal was achieved, 0, no, the sprint goal wasn't achieved. And for a single sprint, it's not that really clear. It jumps way too much to see if the team is doing well. So I'd rather focus in this area on the diagram based on 3 sprints. You have the set of 2 for all areas. So basically, the ones on the right side, the ones based on 3 sprints, are checking the last 3 sprints instead of just a single one. So if you'll fail 2 or 3 sprints, you'll see something like this. Maybe I can actually edit it on the go. So yeah, you'll see that this team is not really doing well if they start to deliver their sprint goals. You'll see that they're actually getting better and the trend is positive. So yeah, basically that's what I have in mind regarding the visualizing if the team is delivering value. Does this answer the question?
I don't know, but I hope so. Let's wait for another question from this person.
Thank you very much. So in total, it's not critical what exact measurement you will use for each of those areas. In some projects, we're able to have literally amount of money delivered by this particular feature, and that was the best tool to calculate the value that the team delivered at the moment. At the same time, it's not always the case. In some projects, it's near impossible to calculate how much money we earned based on that feature. That's why we have introduced this simplified version. But if you have any ideas for improvements on each of those metrics, on alternative ways to measure the same areas, go ahead and feel free to start using them. And I'll be more than happy to receive your feedback on those. So once again, a reminder that you can download those and reach out to me. And basically, that's the last theoretical part from this slide. So before I'll jump to the questions, just wanted to, first of all, once again, thank the Agile community from Kazakhstan for inviting me and for giving me this opportunity to share. And I also wanted to encourage all of you to take part actively with this community, to join it, and to see what other fantastic events we might have in the future. For sure, we have the second day of the conference tomorrow, so don't miss that. And with this comment, I'm ready to answer all of your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Lukasz. And actually, we have 2 questions. The very first one is about story points. What is the right way to establish minimal story point? Do you revelate minimal story point after some time? And yeah, just like 2 questions in 1 sentence.
Fair enough. So one of the good ways of introducing story points with the team and establishing what a one story point should be is going through your backlog, take the first ticket you've got and put it in the middle of an empty whiteboard. Then take the second ticket you have and compare it. Is it smaller, bigger, or to be honest, quite similar? And after doing that with, let's say, I don't know, 8, 10 tickets, you can see some groups that are really similar to each other, and you can see the significant differences between the others. And then once you can see the smallest group that you've got, I would start with assigning 1 story point to that, 2 story points to the second group, and so on, using the Fibonacci sequence, since it's really hard to say that something is, for example, 10 and 11 story points, but you know that it's bigger than 8, it's, for example, 13. So basically, that's how I usually try to introduce that to the team, especially when the team is new. We revisit that basically at the end of each sprint. We're actually putting the cards that we had within the sprint and see how correct were our estimations. Should that have really been 5 story points? Should the other ticket really be just 1 story point? And over the course of, let's say, 3 sprints, we're improving a lot. Later on, the same exercise does not bring that much value since it gets quite, it becomes a norm for the entire team. So we're becoming comfortable and we have comparisons from the past. How big was 5, how big was 1 story point? And still you can evaluate it after some longer period of time to see if it's still the way we would like to do, and yeah, check if you want to keep it the way it is.
Okay, thank you, Lukasz. And one more question. You used to be Java developer and you're Scrum Master right now. What are the chances for a person from non-IT to become Scrum or Agile Master for IT teams?
Okay, so having a background in IT makes it easier, but it's definitely not enough by itself. And not having the background in IT will slightly complicate your life and your work, but it will not make it impossible. For the area where this has the biggest impact is, for example, trying to explain to people from outside of the team which interactions are and aren't useful for the team. They might be interrupting the team and not even understand that. If you have the context, if you're aware of what level of detail is good for the team, you'll be better prepared to guide this discussion. Same for discussions within the team. If you have technical background, it will be much easier for you to notice when discussion within a team is going into unnecessarily detailed level, or when we're actually drifting way too far from the original topic. Without understanding those, it will be much harder. Still possible. I've seen Scrum Masters who didn't have the, for example, developers background. I've seen a few BAs who were very successful as Scrum Masters. Some of them had many years of experience. Some of them have just started before they moved to Scrum Master role. So yeah, it's harder, but not impossible.
Okay, I think it's clear. And one more question we have in our chat. Are there any kind of projects where collecting metrics is useless? I think it's a very good one.
Yeah, I like it. That's a tough one, to be honest. I'm quite sure that there will be a lot of projects where metrics will be useless. I'm thinking right now about some unusual examples where we're introducing similar tools and approaches. For example, when we're introducing the Agile methodologies outside of IT. For example, we're introducing the Kanban into our local HR team, which helped them to organize the work, to basically reduce waste and delays, and they didn't ever use metrics. But now that I think about it, I'm wondering if it would help them or not. I doubt it, since the size, for example, of the tickets they're working on, each of them is so different. Some of them take a quarter, some of them take 2 days. Comparing, for example, responsiveness for such different size of tickets, while you know that it will stay that way, they will always be very different. It won't necessarily bring value right away. And similar experience we had with trying to introduce, for example, the very same Kanban board to our talent acquisition team, where it turned out that we would have 170 cards, one for each of the candidates in the pipeline, with 40 steps and with, let's say, 7 handovers on the go, where also simple metrics wouldn't really help. They will just add effort and mess. So I'm quite sure there are projects where collecting metrics will not be very helpful. But in regular IT projects, I think most of them would find it beneficial.
Okay, great. We don't have any other questions, and I think that's it. We would like to thank you, Lukasz, for your time, for your presentation. It was amazing, and I'm pretty sure that all of us will get a lot of useful techniques and metrics which we can apply in our projects. And yeah, just for everybody, if you have any questions to Lukasz, you can find his contacts here on the screen. I'm pretty sure that Lukasz will be more than happy to answer on any kind of questions about his presentation. And Lukasz, I hope that we can see you one day on one of our offline conferences where not just online. I think
it will be
my
pleasure.
Yeah,
I'll be more than happy to have you here. I'll be more than happy to visit you. Once again, thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for spending time to listen to what I had to share, and it was a pleasure for me. And I'm looking forward to working with you in the future.
Lukasz, one more question.
Yes.
Just get one more. You're only one representative from non, like post-Soviet Union countries. Do you feel different flavors of Agile among different countries? From your point of view, what's the difference between usage of Agile in your country and maybe in some other countries, just like according to your experience?
Very nice question. And I would say that it's extremely different, not based on the country, but rather on specific company. Even within a single company, we can have, let's say, 10 or 20 teams. And if the Agile itself isn't very mature in there, the differences between teams are really a wild west. I was working so far with, I think, 7 different Scrum teams in total, and they're extremely different, even though most of them were within the same company. And whenever I'm having some kind of discussions and I'm basically, let's call it a consultant for other companies and other projects, differences are way bigger than I would expect, keeping in mind that, for example, Scrum is quite well described. So it seems like it's really hard to do it in different way. And after visiting few places, it looks like it leaves enough for interpretation and discussion that specific approaches towards it are very different, and in many cases it's even not the fact that it left that room for interpretation. Many of the companies are actually on purpose skipping parts that are not comfortable for them, and keep in mind that nowadays that Scrum became quite popular, every company will tell them that they have Scrum or something like Scrum, because they'll be scared that no one will join them if they'll say that they work in waterfall. So in most cases, some of them will have a lot of experience with the framework. Some of them will pretend a bit, but yeah, the differences are really enormous.
Okay, and I guess that we have the last question for today. Mm-hmm. And how do you name Scrum Masters in Kanban projects, since it's not Scrum, it's just like another framework or way of using Agile?
Also, very good question. I had opportunity to work few times within Kanban. I actually switched to Kanban with my teams when we had projects in which customer no longer cared about the predictability. We knew that for next 2 months, we'll just have to make sure that we're handling requests as they go as fast as possible. So they still referred to me as a Scrum Master, even though we were not working in Scrum. And personally, I also felt quite uncomfortable and kind of endangered, because if I'm recommending to move out of a Scrum, if I'm a Scrum Master, are they going to kick me out or not? But they definitely didn't. They still saw the value in the things that I added to the team. And also keep in mind that Scrum and Kanban can work in pair very well. You don't have to choose between one or the other. There are actually a set of quite different practices that can enhance each other. So back then we knew that we're skipping some of the Scrum practices and we no longer called it Scrum for that period of time. But yeah, they still refer to me as a Scrum Master. I've seen the change agent or agile coach titles, but to be honest, for the first 2 years when I was a Scrum Master, I was still referred to as senior Java developer. So I stopped putting that much attention to the names and then just focused on making sure that I'm working at a company that provides very interesting challenges to handle.
Yeah, many different names, but the meaning is the same. I think that's the
Yep.
idea of your answer. Okay, thank you, Lukasz.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you, you too. And have a nice second day of the conference. Everyone.
Yeah, and I know you can join too and listen to all of the presentations tomorrow. I know that you can understand Russian a little bit, but not everything.
Yeah. I'll do my best.
Okay.